But one thing I learned, it was President Truman had a quote and said, "It's incredible what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit." And I would say there's two types of politicians. This could be at city council. This could be on the U.S. Senate. There's workhorses and show horses. And if you want to go up to Capitol Hill and you want to create a soundbite, you want to clip it onto YouTube, and you want to get likes and clicks, you can do that. And we all know that you can accomplish that. But if you want to get things done, when the cameras are off, when the lights have gone out, everyone's moved on, and you really are trying to hammer out details, that's when the work is done. Meeting with your constituents before the session even begins. Learning and going out on the street and talking to people who maybe are experiencing homelessness or mental illness or addiction. That's the things you need to bring to the table when you're trying to solve these problems.
Welcome to Conversations with David Ibarra. Today we have a guest, one of my favorite people, Representative Tyler Clancy, the Utah House of Representatives. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, David. You are one of my favorite people, so I'm happy to be here.
Well, cool. I want to jump in and talk about several things today, but what I'd like you to do is start by telling us a little bit more about you, the early days, your childhood, your upbringing, and I would particularly like you to talk a little bit about your mom and dad and what they taught you.
Well, thank you for that intro, and I love the question because I think I've watched your podcast, I've listened to, and when we have so many great leaders in our community, you find out that a lot of it's not new. It's just who they were growing up. I grew up in a very simple household. My mother was a teacher and my father was a police officer. And but two key components of those professions was service. Neither of those professions you're going to make a lot of money and definitely not recognition or fame, but they were driven by an inherent love for their neighbor and wanted to do something to serve. And that was something that was passed on to me. Now, when I was younger and it was Saturday morning and I wanted to watch TV or play with my friends and we're going to a service project, I wasn't thrilled. But as I look back now, having that key component of service from a young age made a world of difference as I grew up and progressed.
Right. And you grew up where?
I grew up in Beaufort, South Carolina. So if you've ever seen the movie Forrest Gump, it was filmed there. Right? That bridge where he's running over and all that. But it was a great town. My father, before law enforcement, was in the Marines, and that was his last duty station on Parris Island. And so they have Hollywood Marines and East Coast Marines, and that's where he was stationed.
Great.
So,
well,
sir.
I met your mother. I had the pleasure of meeting your mother, and very impressive as a family leader for sure. Tell me, if you had one lesson that you could talk about, one or two lessons from your mother and what she taught you in the areas of values, what would they be?
So I'll tell you a moment where it all came together, and that was my father, as you know, David, battled with cancer for many years. Right. And towards the very end of his life, I would say the last month of his life, he was having struggles physically, and my mother was physically taking care of him, managing relationships and the craziness of the pandemic. There were so many things going on. I remember hearing something, I'm not kidding, it was 12:30 in the morning, and I thought to myself, what's going on downstairs? So I go downstairs, everyone's asleep in the home, and my mom's making an apple pie. I said, Mom, why are you making an apple pie? And she said, I told the young women of our faith congregation that I would show them, this recipe. And I realized that it's tomorrow as I was supposed to do it. And I was blown away. Most of us, myself included, when faced with such a challenge, we might want to let our responsibilities or commitments fall by the wayside. My mother's never been that person. Thick or thin, rain or shine, if she made a commitment, she was going to follow through. And that is something that throughout my life, I've been very blessed to have seen
Right.
that firsthand.
And in meeting your mother, one of the qualities that I could see real quick, a pleasing personality.
Absolutely. She is friendly to a fault. Sometimes I don't want to have people over at the house, but if there's someone in need, you better believe she's going to turn over every rock and every leaf in the neighborhood and the community, whether it's a crib for a single mother
Right.
and their husband's deployed, whatever it might be, she's going to make it work. And that heart, she leads with her heart.
That's excellent. Now, let's talk about your father and some of the lessons and values that he wanted to share with you and instill in you. What would be a few of the examples of what you gained from your father? And I believe he was chief of police, wasn't he?
He was. He was the chief of police. I'll tell you, you and I share a similar bond in that way, that our father's no longer here.
Right.
But I'll tell you, and you know this, and we've had these discussions, but their influence never leaves you. And
So true.
I wouldn't even say it's what values instill, but to this day, I think about, how would my father handle this situation?
Wow.
Leadership, being the chief of police, I was able to see leadership in good times and leadership in hard times. During the Great Recession, when cutbacks needed to be made, my father worked to trim down his own salary if others were going down. Certain things about leading from the front. And one thing I think that could encapsulate his philosophy of leadership, we were cleaning out his office after he passed away. He had a little a sticky note here. And it was one of those pictures, you get online, and it was a chariot and some people, pulling this person in the chariot. And the person in the chariot, is sitting there, and it says "in charge," and then the person at the front of the line who's pulling it and saying, "Come on, let's go," it says "leader."
Wow.
And I thought that perfectly encapsulated what my family challenged me to live up to.
Right. Well, there is no doubt that when we talk about our dads,
Yeah.
that they never leave us.
No.
I can hear my dad whisper to me from time to time, and I'm sure you can hear yours.
Sometimes it's a whisper, sometimes it's an elbow, but
Very
nevertheless,
good. Yeah,
absolutely.
That's great. And if memory serves me right, upon your father passing, and you wanted to have a tribute to you, you formed some kind of a
scholarship.
yes. Go and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I worked right under someone who led with that legacy, yourself, in the Ibarra Foundation, in the Latino Leaders Foundation that helps underprivileged youth reach that potential. My father definitely was not a wealthy man by any stretch, but there were so many people who loved in the community, and they said, how can we help your family through this time?
Right.
And we kind of got together as a family and said, we're blessed. We don't need anything, but what could we do? And so at the college that he taught at, he taught criminal justice on the side. We established one scholarship a year for an outstanding student who wanted to go back and serve their community as a police officer to pay that tuition.
Wow.
And
Very
it's
good.
cool to see through the years that matriculate.
That's good, and that's in your father's name.
It is. Yes, sir.
Excellent. So, what bring you to Utah from South Carolina?
Where do I begin? No, Utah has always had a really special place in our hearts as the Clancys. My mother went to school here. We visited really every year for summer and had so many family and friends that live out here. I had the opportunity. I was blessed enough to play lacrosse at Brigham Young University, and
Wow.
and that was exciting for me. We got to go and challenge each other every day at 5 o'clock in the morning. So you see, at BYU, there's a lot of sports, football, basketball, and they take precedence, really popular. Lacrosse, we're on the lower tier. And so we had to go in early, and our practices were at 5:15 in the morning, and we would do our conditioning and get after it. But it was an incredible opportunity that allowed me to come out to school, get an education, and make some incredible relationships along the way as well.
Excellent. Now, while you were at Brigham Young University, and tell me a little bit about your experience, and particularly what I'm interested in, some of the leadership roles that you gravitated to and began to have leadership really be a part of who you are.
That's a really good question. I would say that obviously sports has a big role to play. I was president of the Republicans Club when I was on campus, and then also working with the Political Review. So it was our newspaper, and I was the editor of that. And so I had the opportunity to serve in different roles. But I'll tell you, whether you're a freshman legislator or you're a freshman lacrosse player, I learned the most about leadership when I was a freshman, because you are the recipient of either good leadership or bad leadership. Luckily for me in lacrosse, it was good leadership. And so by the time I became a senior and I was the captain of the team and doing, having new people, welcoming new people to the team, I could think back on, what did I miss when I was a freshman? What do I wish I could have had, a hand over my shoulder on a bad practice day or whatever it might be. And those experiences are invaluable. And whatever it is, you know this firsthand, whether it's in business, in the private sector, that translates to leadership in our community.
Absolutely. Now, you graduate from Brigham Young University, and when is it, and tell me a little bit about how it came about that you determined what was going to be your life purpose?
I had an incredible opportunity, as you know, to become the executive director of the Pioneer Park Coalition. Now it's called Solutions Utah, and I think that's a phenomenal name. And as the director, really, I was the liaison between private sector groups, government entities, nonprofits, and even homeless individuals, working at the intersection of homelessness, public safety, drug addiction, all of those unique challenges that we face. And I was inspired by meeting all of those different people. And when you have meetings throughout the week, let's say you have meetings with 30 people, very quickly, one or two or three start to stand out. And you say, this person is really leading the way on this initiative. I think of Randy Shumway at Cicero. I think of Tiffany Price, who right up the street. Right. People that are willing to put in the elbow grease, the capital, the skin in the game, to sit down, and they're not trying to throw people under the bus. They're not trying to point out problems, but they're trying to get things done. And so I think one overarching theme through those experiences was I knew wherever I landed, I wanted to be a problem solver, not a pointer, but to get things done.
Now, you say pointer. What does that mean?
Well, a good friend of mine, introduced me to a book that would resonate with many of us, and it's a story, an analogy about a community that no one's cleaning up after their dog, after the dog goes to the bathroom, and everyone's frustrated. They're having meetings, they're putting up posters, and everyone's pointing out, and then there's one person who's not saying too much, but scoops it up and starts to clean it up. And the moral of that story is that there's being a pointer and saying, oh, look at this problem, look at that problem, that's not in high demand because we have plenty of those. But what is in high demand is people who are willing to roll up their sleeves and get things done. And that's why I've always loved that story.
You're a scooper.
I try to be.
Well, you don't want to be a pooper. You don't want to be a pointer. You do want to be a scooper.
Yes, sir.
And the book is a children's book called The Dog Poop Initiative.
Yeah. DPI.
Let's move on and talk about, I'm really interested in wanting to know and share with the viewers, what made you decide to go into law enforcement and then shortly thereafter to decide that at the age of 26 years old, I believe, to become a representative of the Utah State Representatives?
Well, the decision to go into law enforcement was, I would say, less of a decision and more of an inevitable.
Cool.
It was just the universe had always dropped me off in that area
Mm-hmm.
with my father's example. His father was a police officer in the military, and I don't know, something about Irish guys, they become police officers. But I really wanted to take a step out of the office, and I wanted to get more boots on the ground, if you will. And had an opportunity to apply, and eventually was offered an opportunity to be a member of the Provo City Police Department, which I proudly am today. I go back to work tomorrow. So,
Yes.
and it's an incredible experience. Many people think, as a police officer, as a law enforcement officer, you're chasing around bad guys in the middle of the night. That's true. But I'll tell you, more than anything, what surprised me is you're going to get called to a wide array of circumstances. And every single time it's a 911 call, an emergency call for service, it's going to be someone's worst day. And if you're someone who is not interested in solving the problem, you just want to look good, good luck. Find a different job. Go serve ice cream. Because as a police officer, you are injected into someone's home, maybe into a car accident, maybe into a mental health crisis. And you have to rely on the tools of the community and who you are as a person to try and get it done. And that's I think what's lost a lot of times when we talk about law enforcement.
That is absolutely couldn't be said better.
Greetings, I'm David Ibarra. I'm delighted to share with you my new book, Live Ready, Beyond Think and Grow Rich. As one of the largest licensees of Dr. Napoleon Hill's Science of Success principles, I've taken it upon myself to modernize these principles and to share these principles in my own voice. I promise you, if you read this book and become a disciple of these principles, it will change your life. Order it today on Amazon.com. Thank you.
Tell me now, at 26 years old, what made you decide that you could be a representative of the House?
Well, I'll tell you a brief story. I had just gotten off shift, just my normal shift. And this is in the fall of 2022, and I was reading the news just per usual, and I saw in the news that my representative in my neighborhood had stepped down because his business had become very successful, and he just didn't have the time to invest into that role. And my wife was in the kitchen, and so I start talking to her, and I say, I would really love if we could tackle this issue of mental health or this issue of homelessness and this way and this way and that way. And she says, okay, I'm going to stop you. She said, you have an opportunity to do something about it, but if not, can you please spare me? And, she really said that same thing. You're pointing. How about you start scooping? And so I made calls to some trusted friends, yourself included, and said, what do we think about this? And we took a chance, and we entered that special election in 2022, and we worked our tail off. I'll tell you one thing. I know there's young people that watch your show, and they're wanting to emulate good leaders. And I'll tell you two things you told me when we were on the campaign trail, and one was by example and one you actually told me. But the first was we had several events, and I can tell you, consistently, I was the only candidate who wore a suit and tie to every event. Now, I represent almost 50,000 people now as a member of the House of Representatives. Those 50,000 people expect me to be on my best behavior, to be the best I can be when I'm representing them. Putting on a shirt and tie, I think, is a bare minimum if you want to go be a leader. The second is I was really, towards the end, I was really frenetic about, what about this issue? What about HB so-and-so, everything? And I was talking to you about this. I said, what do you think about this? He said, stop. People at this point, they understand what your politics are, but they want to know who you are. They want to know what kind of person that when they call their representative, when they're picking up the phone or typing email, they want to know who's on the other side. So I scrapped my speech for that last campaign rally and really just tried to speak from the heart and be authentic. Right. And that was the best advice I've received, and people really resonated with that.
Well, it's important. There is no doubt about it. talk from the heart. And if you have to talk from a script,
Right.
then you just don't know the subject matter.
Right.
I want to now jump into you become a representative and you go to Capitol Hill. Tell me about the experience of starting, and I particularly want you to talk about how it came to your mind that you could write a bill, particularly HB 298, and talk about that bill. But I want first talk about starting and then how you decided, no, I'm going to do something that others haven't been able to do.
It was very intimidating when I got to Capitol. I had been there as a tourist many times, but all of a sudden there was a desk and it had my name on it. And I felt that imposter syndrome, almost like the first time I walked into the IBG building and walked in the office for the first time. I had the tie, I had the jacket. Oh man, it's time to get to work. Very early on, I learned and observed another thing my father taught me, the 2 ears, 1 mouth rule. Listen more than you speak. And so I tried to do that. But one thing I learned, it was President Truman had a quote and said, "It's incredible what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit." And I would say there's 2 types of politicians. This could be at city council. This could be on the U.S. Senate. There's workhorses and show horses. And if you want to go up to Capitol Hill and you want to create a soundbite, you want to clip it onto YouTube, and you want to get likes and clicks, you can do that. And we all know that you can accomplish that. But if you want to get things done, when the cameras are off, when the lights have gone out, everyone's moved on, and you really are trying to hammer out details, that's when the work is done. Meeting with your constituents before the session even begins. Learning and going out on the street and talking to people who maybe are experiencing homelessness or mental illness or addiction. That's the things you need to bring to the table when you're trying to solve these problems.
Perfect. So you get your sea legs, so to speak, and you decided that you're going to write this bill.
House Bill 298 was very important to me. And I took the perspective that if we're here on Capitol Hill, we have the ability and the authority. Why would we, start here? We need to really live up to our challenge of being representatives. And so House Bill 298 did a number of things, but the most important one is creating effective systems. We can have all the good feelings and thoughts and intentions in the world, but as we know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. That's not good enough, especially for those on our streets who really need those effective systems. I myself, as a state lawmaker last year, was trying to find certain answers about this policy or this shelter or resource center, and I was caught in a tangle of phones and bureaucracy, and I couldn't figure it out. And I was so frustrated, I thought to myself, if I can't get these answers, well, I sure as heck know that someone from the community who doesn't have the pull to say, so bring this now.
House Bill 298 is about how it is we ought to approach systems within our homelessness crisis that we're experiencing in this city, in this state, and throughout this entire nation. Talk to me a little bit about what does the bill include, what was the approach, and what was the solutions it offers.
Everyone in the world can point to what we don't want to be. We don't want to be San Francisco. We don't want to be Seattle. Okay, that's great. But what is Utah? What are we going to do tomorrow? The first thing we did was we wiped the board of the Utah Homelessness Council. It was 29-person council.
Yeah.
We both know you can't get anything done with a group that large. We tailored it to a group of 11 and created a board, a more functioning board.
Right.
And that board is going to be focused on accountability and data. I'll get to the heart of your question. What does success look like with homelessness policy? Do we measure success by the amount of socks we give out or the amount of people we give a bed? Maybe that's a piece of it. But I think if you talk to most Utahns across the state, they would say, well, I think success is that someone goes into a resource center and after a time of working with caseworkers, they don't have to go back anymore. We can measure that. It was outlined in an audit in 2021, but it just never was taken action on. And so in House Bill 298, we are now measuring success, our homeless services. That's the standard, is by how many people don't need our help anymore.
Right.
And that is, I think, a powerful shift from what we had been doing in years prior.
Well, it does bring some accountability if you're the provider and you're getting the resources. You have to have a purpose to what you do, and that's the elimination of your need.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? I think most people could articulate that, but our policies need to reflect it.
Yes.
The other piece that we addressed in our core principles is we really copied and pasted the federal guidelines of how we want to solve homelessness. And there's a policy in there called housing first. And this idea of housing first is very similar to harm reduction or these other pieces that we've discussed before, that says that someone's core need, if they're experiencing severe drug addiction, severe mental illness, and they've been living on the street in a tent for 5 years, what they need is a house. And that's it. We know that's not true.
That's not true.
And so what we wrote in our House Bill 298 is we changed our mission statement. We completely changed our mission statement and our quality and our criteria of how we look at funding and policy. And we said it's about human dignity, that next rung of human dignity. For some, that might be long-term drug treatment. For some, it might be jail.
Right.
For some, it might be maybe a mother fleeing domestic violence. Maybe they do need to get a roof over their head for a couple weeks and they're back on their feet and they don't need our help anymore. But whatever it is, we can't take the talking points and the copy and paste and think that's going to be good enough, because it's not.
Right. You know, and the accountability piece of being able to view, understand, and direct someone to the need of repairing what is broken within them. And that creates a reseeding of their belief systems. And that doesn't happen by giving somebody a blanket.
Right.
It just doesn't happen. Talk to the viewers a little bit about what does harm reduction mean?
Well, I'll tell you what I've seen. What I have seen in harm reduction is we meet people where they are, but we don't challenge them to leave that place.
Right.
During the hearing for House Bill 298, we actually had individuals testify at the hearing who had been in those positions, who had been on Skid Row in Los Angeles, who had been downtown Salt Lake City living in tents. And they said, I needed someone to help me leave that. And so what harm reduction, I think, is kind of leaving people where they are. What we're trying to say is we're going to meet you where you are. We're going to have those boots on the ground and we're going to learn your name. But we're going to offer you a hand and say, come with us, my friend. You are too good to be in this squalor. And that is really, I think, a big culture shift.
It is about changing the maintenance of what is to the belief of what could be. And, you know, I've said this quote hundreds of times, and I've used it on this program, but I think that people are one of two things. Some see things as they are and say, why? Poor us. Others dream dreams that never were and say, why not? Why not us? And I love your bill because it's a why not us? Why not you? We can start to believe again, and when we do, we gain hope, we gain dignity, and then we're on the path of changing our lives. And that's what we owe people. That's what we owe people, is a direction to change and improve.
I could not agree more. And there is nothing compassionate about seeing someone who maybe they're in a mental illness, whatever it might be, in a tent, and they're not wearing clothes and it's the middle of winter. And the compassionate thing to do is I'm going to step over that person no. And we know that because there's people that you and I both love who have been there. And there's people that maybe they're still there.
Right.
And we want something better. And our systems need to reflect that.
And it simply is not the Utah way.
No.
We're better than this, and we're going to find our way back thanks to folks like you. Thanks to leaders that want to lead. And that's doing the hard things. No doubt about it. How were you first accepted as a 26-year-old young man, a leader, who chose to take this initiative on your first year and pass this bill. Not only write it, pass it.
I would be remiss if I just agreed with your statement and said that this is a singular, I did this, or I got this bill passed, or no, it was a we.
Right.
And long before the lights turned on at the Capitol, long before the House doors were unlocked, we worked hard on sharing these beliefs, sharing these narratives, sharing what's went wrong, but not stopping there, but saying, what can we do right? And it was a team effort. There were so many people involved. I would spend too much time to say everything, but when people realize that this person's really here to get it done, I can't just slow walk this person because they're a bulldog and they're coming after this. They finally say, okay, let's talk. Let's get to work.
Well, let me share what I was told from folks at the Hill. They said that real quick, they didn't look at you as a 26-year-old young man. Real quick, they looked at you as a dynamic leader because you had all the qualities. And now this bill is being viewed across this nation as one of the first bills to really approach this in a logical leadership fashion.
We have been approached by different national organizations who said, this really could be a model for other states. We're very interested to see how this works in Utah because no state has really, they've always said, no, we don't want this, we don't want that, but they've never proactively said, we want something good. And so it's going to be interesting to see.
And now it's going to be about creating believers out of the providers. Because until they believe, we're in trouble. If they disbelieve, they'll try to prove you wrong, to prove us wrong, and we can't have that. I just got handed a note from my son, Nicholas Ibarra, who puts this together for us, and he reminds me that it's time for me to do a little advertisement of my own. If you like this program, Conversations with David Ibarra, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a like. Now, in closing, a friend of yours bought my new book, just released, and that is Live Ready, Beyond Think and Grow Rich. It articulates the principles by which I lived my life that were first introduced by Dr. Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich, and this is a modern version of that in my voice with examples that are modern-day examples. Well, Scott Howe, past senator to our state, bought this book and wanted me to give it to you on this program. So,
well, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. And it was a pleasure to have a conversation with you, Representative
The pleasure is
Clancy.
mine. Thank you, sir.